Then there was somebody else I met around the same time called Sunil Mittal. And Sunil Mittal's idea was even better. He thought that he would import push-button phones in the 80s from Japan. And so he did that, and it all went quite well. And then along came the auctioning of telecom licenses for the spectrum for cell phones. And so he got a foreign corporation, which will remain nameless, and said, you know, what kind of market could there be for these new cell phones? And they said, we think it's going to be big. We think you could sell 50,000 of these in India during the next 10 years. Now, he now runs Bharti Airtel, which has 140 million subscribers in India. And in India, the whole of India, there are something like 700 million cell phones, which is a truly mind-boggling statistic. And the way to explain it is the fact that people use them very carefully. They might only send SMSs. They might only send texts. They might, for example, in a joint family, send one brother from the field to the market, and another brother would go to a market in another town, and they would send an SMS saying where the price was better, and then the crop would be shifted from one to another. So in other words, the people who are using that new technology of the cell phone in India are people who are often very, very poor. In fact, often people who are technically well below the poverty level. And then, of course, you get other stories. One little brief anecdote, if you'll allow me. I was interviewing somebody about Chandraswami. I don't know if any of you remember Chandraswami. He was the great godman of the 1980s. You used to see him with Mobutu of Zaire. He used to advise Mobutu of Zaire as to which of his ministers he should sack, to put it politely. And then you used to have pictures of him with Ferdinand Marcos or Indira Gandhi or the Sultan of Brunei. And I was interviewing somebody who'd been traveling with him about how he gave his spiritual advice to world leaders. And he said, well, you know, at that time, we used to fly around on Adnan Khashoggi's DC-8. That was before everybody had planes. And I was just thinking, well, that actually says quite a lot about India's new rich. Before everyone had planes. Yeah, I didn't want to say, actually, I didn't own a plane. I have a car, but you know, I haven't yet gone on to having a plane. But it's that way of thinking that is prevalent among this elite at the top of the Indian economy. Now, what about at the opposite end? Again, the stories are startling and shocking, although in a very different way. So, for example, when I was in Bangalore meeting some very inspiring entrepreneurs, I made a trip about 100 miles south to a little village near Mysore, a temple village, and I met somebody by the name of Venkatesh. Venkatesh had been effectively a bonded laborer inside a quarry. In other words, his boss in the quarry had lent him money and had then suddenly hit him with a bill of saying, you owe me the equivalent of, I think it was about a couple of $100. And Venkatesh ran away, and he was caught, and he was brought back, and he was put into fetters, into metal fetters. And he lived for almost 2 years inside that quarry, as did several others, as effectively a slave of the quarry owner. And he was only released because by chance during an election campaign, some farming activists came to the quarry, realized what was happening, and then effectively stormed the quarry, and the people who were enslaved were released. Now that is a particularly extreme example, but it is not unique. I actually spoke to one of the farming activists who'd freed him, and I said, you know, could this still be going on in Karnataka today or in other states in India? And he said no, in that people are not manacled, but in terms of the debt, the bondage which amounts to slavery, it's pretty much the same thing. And equally, in Bangalore itself, one of the main kind of tech hubs of South India, the conditions in which the people who are doing the construction projects are truly horrifying. So it's almost as if you have the prosperity and you have the extreme poverty side by side. They're not in different parts of the country. They're all very much shaken up together.